It started like any other peaceful weekend. My wife and I had packed up a cooler full of snacks, some firewood, and the dogs, ready to enjoy a serene escape at our lake cabin, a quiet place I'd built with my own hands over the course of 2 exhausting years. Nestled in a secluded corner of the lake, the cabin stood proudly, its porch overlooking the gently rippling waters and our handcrafted dock that jutted out just far enough for fishing, kayaking, or sitting in silence. That dock was more than just wood and nails. It was where I taught my daughter to cast a line, where my father and I spent quiet evenings in thought, and where generations of memories had been made. As we turned down the familiar gravel road, dust kicking up behind the truck, I noticed something odd in the air. There was tension, unnatural silence. Birds that usually chirped away in the trees were gone, and the usual glint of sunlight on water seemed muted. When we finally pulled up the driveway, my heart sank. The dock, our dock, was gone. Not damaged, not weathered, gone. As if it had been yanked out of the water and carried off by giants. I slammed the truck door shut and raced down the hill toward the lake's edge, my boots sinking into the muddy shoreline that should have been shaded by the dock's planks. In its place was churned-up water and broken bits of lumber floating in the shallows. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt nearby, leading away toward the road, signs of heavy equipment. My wife gasped behind me, her hand covering her mouth. "Who would do this?" she whispered, stunned. I didn't have an answer, but I was going to find out. I marched straight up to the HOA's office, fuming. Our neighborhood had a voluntary HOA, one I never signed up for. They had no jurisdiction over my lakefront property, which sat outside their development boundary. Still, they acted like they ran the entire lake, enforcing arbitrary rules with passive-aggressive notices and overreaching threats. And sitting behind the front desk that morning, sipping from a smug little mug that said, Queen of the Lake, was none other than Karen Delaney, the self-proclaimed president of the HOA and the bane of every independent landowner in the area. "Well, well," she said with a mocking smile as I stormed in. "I heard someone had a messy little structure collapse. Tisk, tisk. Safety hazard, you know." My fists clenched. "You demolished my dock." Her eyes widened with faux innocence. "Oh, no. I think you'll find the Lake Authority did it. Unpermitted structure, encroaching on public access, you know the drill." "You're not the Lake Authority," she gave a condescending shrug. "We're in communication, and I filed a formal complaint. Consider it community service." I was seeing red. This woman, who had no legal power over my property, had taken it upon herself to destroy part of my home and didn't even bother to notify me. Worse, she was basking in the control. I stormed out, vowing silently that this wasn't over. That evening, I contacted a local surveyor, then dug up the original property lines and deeds from the county office. I confirmed what I already knew. My land stretched right to the waterline, and the dock had been well within my legal rights. Then I dug deeper. Over the years, Karen had inserted herself into various community leadership roles, including pushing to have the HOA manage dam maintenance and spillway oversight. After the town struggled to find funding, I kept digging, and the irony hit me like a brick. Karen may have complained about my dock, but she overlooked one critical fact. The private dam that created the lake in the first place? I owned it. Years ago, when the original landowner sold off parcels for lakeside development, he retained ownership of the dam and spillway. When he passed, I bought the entire structure through a quiet auction, thinking only of water rights and ensuring lake levels for fishing. I never imagined it would be my ticket for justice. The next week, I filed a cease and desist notice against the HOA for unauthorized lake modifications. I hired an attorney and began plans for controlled water restriction. If the HOA wanted to play games, I'd show them what real authority looked like. I commissioned inspections and evaluations of the dam, claiming environmental risks posed by unpermitted construction efforts on or near the waterline. In reality, I just wanted time to ensure I had complete legal standing before I made my next move. Karen, meanwhile, tried to rally the HOA against me. Flyers were posted calling me a danger to the community, claiming I was attempting to dry out the lake to punish innocent residents. But I had done nothing, yet. I simply let the facts circulate. When my lawyer issued a formal declaration, confirming my ownership of the dam and spillway and my right to restrict flow at any time for safety and maintenance, the HOA panicked. Still, Karen didn't back down. She doubled down, filing complaints with the county, attempting to prove my dock had violated some obscure shoreline clause. Every attempt failed. She even tried to use the local newspaper, giving interviews where she painted herself as a defender of Lake Harmony and labeled me a rogue land baron. My response? Silence and preparation. I had contractors quietly reinforce the dam's access gates. A professional water management team was brought in to assess possible consequences of adjusting the spillway flow. And when everything was ready, I scheduled a temporary restriction on water release under the guise of structural testing and safety upgrades. Within 2 days, the lake level dropped 3 feet. Docks floated awkwardly. Boats tilted. Karen's prized gazebo, built at the edge of her property without permits, now sat in 6 inches of mud. The HOA's communal dock, refurbished just the year before, cracked and sank under its own weight. I watched from my porch as frantic calls were made, HOA board members rushing down to the water with tape measures and clipboards, trying to document the disaster. And that's when I struck the final blow. I filed suit against the HOA for damages to my property, including trespass, unauthorized demolition, and emotional distress. I included before and after drone footage of my dock, repair estimates, and written statements from contractors. Karen, of course, tried to blame contractors acting on her behalf, but the paper trail was crystal clear. The judge didn't even blink. Within weeks, I had a settlement agreement, forcing the HOA to pay for a complete rebuild of my dock, including upgrades. Karen was removed as HOA president after a vote of no confidence. And the best part? I left the water level low for a while longer, just long enough for every HOA board member to get a taste of how fragile their power really was. But I wasn't done yet. I began drafting plans for a private dock extension, one that would not only replace what I had lost, but become the finest structure on the entire lake. Multi-tiered levels, solar lighting, kayak lifts, the works, funded, ironically, by the very people who tore down the original. When the construction began, I made sure the workers wore shirts that said "Rebuilt Better." Every hammer strike echoed like justice. Karen, now stripped of her imaginary crown, moved away quietly. No farewell party, no send-off, just a U-Haul and a flustered face. The new HOA board now consulted me regularly on lake matters, and I made it clear. I wanted nothing to do with them unless it involved transparency, respect, and personal boundaries. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right across the water and the wind carries the sound of cicadas and rustling trees, I sit at the edge of my new dock, beer in hand, and smile. They tried to take something from me. Instead, they reminded me just how much power I truly held. The morning after I had sealed the spillway, the air felt different, thick with anticipation, bristling with the kind of tension that preceded a storm. It wasn't long before the HOA president, Karen, showed up at the dam site flanked by a small entourage of board members, all dressed like they were going to war instead of a lake. She had her arms crossed, her lips pursed into a line of outrage, and a binder full of threats I assumed were her usual legal bluffs. I stood at the edge of the dam, watching her march up with the audacity of someone who still believed they had control over something. She didn't yet understand that she'd poked the wrong bear. Karen wasted no time. "You can't do this!" she yelled, flapping her binder at me like it held divine authority. "This dam affects everyone's access to the lake. You're jeopardizing the whole community." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, before replying with the calm precision I'd developed from years of managing tense standoffs in my career. "Actually, I can," I said, pulling out a certified copy of the property deed and water rights. "The dam sits entirely on land I own. The HOA failed to recognize that while they were busy tearing down my private dock without due process." Karen's face turned a deep shade of red, her confidence fracturing under the weight of actual legal facts. That marked the beginning of the HOA's unraveling. They tried everything: emergency meetings, pressuring county inspectors, even calling in their go-to lawyer who specialized in nuisance lawsuits. But they couldn't make the dam magically fall under their jurisdiction. What they failed to realize was that I had preemptively taken every step to bulletproof my actions. I had consulted a water management attorney, ensured environmental compliance, and even submitted a notice to the regional water board, just in case Karen tried playing environmental activist next. But the HOA wasn't just made up of Karen and her clipboard-toting followers. Some of the residents, especially the older ones, had started noticing the changes. While the water level behind the dam stabilized, the flow into the main HOA-controlled lakefront dropped noticeably. Docks sat in shallower water. Boats had trouble getting out, and summer season was fast approaching. The complaints started pouring into the HOA like a leaking faucet that quickly turned into a busted fire hydrant. I heard about it all from one of my unexpected allies, Sam, a longtime resident who had once served as the HOA treasurer before retiring. "Son," he said when he dropped by my cabin with a box of pastries, "I may not agree with everything you've done, but I'll tell you one thing. Nobody liked that woman. She ruled over this place like it was a dictatorship. Most of us just stayed quiet because we didn't want the drama." Sam leaned in and whispered, "But now people are finally starting to speak up." And speak up they did. Within 2 weeks, a petition to recall Karen as HOA President started circulating, spearheaded by a group of residents who had had enough of her tyrannical rule. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very control she had clung to so desperately was now slipping away because she couldn't resist flexing her power over a dock that wasn't hers to touch. In retaliation, Karen launched a public relations blitz. She sent out newsletters accusing me of weaponizing water, claimed I had endangered public safety, and even tried to stir up environmental concerns by alleging the dam closure would harm local fish populations. She had clearly underestimated my preparation. I responded not with more accusations, but with facts. I hired a drone operator to survey the water flow and had the footage stitched into a clean, professional video showing the normalcy behind the dam. I uploaded the video to a community message board alongside official documents confirming my compliance with all regulations. The residents loved it. The HOA board, not so much. At their next meeting I attended, not as a member, but as a landowner whose property had been violated. My presence turned heads. Karen tried to stop me from speaking, citing non-member rules, but I reminded her that her organization had made itself part of my life the moment they bulldozed my dock. I laid out everything: timelines, documents, aerial photos, even texts from residents who had warned Karen not to demolish my dock. The board sat in silence. Karen tried to interject several times, only to be shut down by her own treasurer. It was glorious. By the end of the meeting, the mood had shifted entirely. A motion was made to censure her. Another motion, this one, far more potent, was filed to schedule a formal vote to dissolve the current board altogether. The crowd erupted in applause, and Karen? She stormed out, binder in hand, her heels clicking like the last ticks of a time bomb about to go off. But this story wasn't over. With Karen temporarily dethroned and the board fractured, a wave of proposals started coming through. Residents asking if I'd be willing to coordinate better lake management, a request to help rebuild communal infrastructure, and even one person suggesting I run for a leadership role in the new HOA, if it survived at all. I declined, of course. I didn't start this to lead anyone. I just wanted peace. But now that I had shown what one prepared landowner could do, the community saw the value in having someone who knew how to play defense and offense. In the following months, the landscape changed, literally. The lake was reshaped through a new management plan that accounted for the actual geography and ownership boundaries, not the fantasy map the HOA had invented. Residents began working together rather than through Karen's iron rule. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and glistened on the rebuilt dock at my cabin, this time stronger, larger and equipped with solar lighting, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace, earned and undisputed. As for Karen, the last I heard, she had moved 2 towns over. Rumor had it she tried to get elected to a local zoning committee. But small towns talk, and reputations are hard to outrun, especially when they involve a retired Special Forces engineer who knows how to build more than just a dock. In the end, her thirst for control was her undoing, and I was just the ripple that turned into a wave.